Everyone in town thought Rachel had simply disappeared after the divorce. They had no idea she was still there, living under a new name, slowly dismantling her ex-husband's life piece by piece. And he still doesn't know it's her. Rachel Martinez had been the perfect wife for 15 years. She cooked dinner every night, managed their finances, and even helped build Tom's construction business from nothing. She knew every client, every supplier, every detail that made the business run. But perfection wasn't enough when Tom decided his 23-year-old secretary was more exciting. The betrayal cut deeper than Rachel ever imagined. She found out about the affair when Tom forgot to log out of his email. Months of messages, hotel receipts, and promises to leave his boring old wife filled her screen. The worst part? He had been using their joint credit card to pay for everything. The divorce was brutal. Tom hired the best lawyer in town and painted Rachel as an unstable woman who contributed nothing to their success. He claimed the business was his alone, even though Rachel had worked 60-hour weeks alongside him for years. The judge believed him. Rachel walked away with a beaten-down Honda, a storage unit full of memories, and exactly $4,000. Tom celebrated with his new girlfriend that night, posted photos on social media, bought champagne, and told everyone how free he felt. He had no idea that Rachel was watching from her car across the street, taking notes on every person who entered his celebration. That's when she made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving town like everyone expected, Rachel became someone else entirely. She had 15 years of inside knowledge about Tom's business, his weaknesses, and his secrets, and she was about to use every single piece of it. Rachel's first step was becoming invisible. She dyed her brown hair platinum blonde, lost 30 pounds, and got contact lenses to replace her signature thick glasses. But the real change was her name. Meet Rebecca Stevens, a marketing consultant who had just moved to town. The transformation took months of careful planning. Rachel studied YouTube tutorials on makeup and fashion, learning to create a completely different look. She practiced walking in heels after years of wearing flats. She even took acting classes online, perfecting a slight Southern accent that made her sound nothing like the quiet, reserved woman Tom had thrown away. Rebecca rented a small apartment on the other side of the city and created a completely new identity from scratch. She opened new bank accounts using a legal name change she had processed in another state. New social media accounts with fake friends from college, new phone number, even a fabricated work history with a marketing firm that had conveniently closed down. She spent $3,000 of her $4,000 creating fake references and a college degree from a university 3 states away. The remaining $1,000 went to a wardrobe that screamed confidence, the exact opposite of Rachel's old style. Where Rachel wore cardigans and long skirts, Rebecca wore blazers and fitted dresses. Where Rachel apologized for everything, Rebecca commanded attention. The genius was in the psychological details. Rebecca wore bold red lipstick instead of Rachel's natural look. She got a small tattoo of a phoenix on her wrist, something the old Rachel would never have done. She even changed her handwriting and learned to use her left hand for signatures. When she practiced introducing herself in the mirror, even she was convinced Rebecca Stevens was real. But Rebecca's real weapon wasn't her new look. It was everything she knew about Tom's business from the inside. She had memorized his client list, supplier contracts, and project timelines. She knew which jobs he bid too low on, which permits he fast-tracked, and most importantly, she knew about the illegal shortcuts he took to increase profit margins, the corner cutting that could destroy his reputation overnight. 3 months after the divorce, Rebecca Stevens applied for a job at Morrison Construction, Tom's biggest competitor. Her fake resume was flawless, her fabricated references raved about her marketing skills, and she had insider knowledge about every major project in town. They hired her immediately as their new business development manager. Tom had no idea his ex-wife was now working 2 blocks away from his office, armed with 15 years of his deepest business secrets and a burning desire for justice. Rebecca's first move was psychological warfare. She started leaving traces of herself in Tom's daily life without him realizing it. She knew his favorite coffee shop, his gym schedule, and his route to work. As Rebecca Stevens, she began appearing in these places, always just out of his direct sight, but close enough that something felt familiar. Rebecca would sit 3 tables away at his coffee shop, reading a newspaper while he ordered his usual large black coffee and blueberry muffin. She memorized his routine down to the minute. He arrived every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 7:15 a.m., stayed for 20 minutes, and always left a $2 tip. She would time her arrival for 7:10, order her drink, and position herself where his peripheral vision would catch her blonde hair, but never her full face. She would use the treadmill behind him at the gym, watching him struggle through the same workout routine he had done for years, without any improvement. Tom always started with 15 minutes on the elliptical, moved to the weight machines in the same order, and finished with 10 minutes of stretching. Rebecca would arrive 5 minutes after him, use equipment that gave her a clear view of his routine, and leave exactly when he moved to the locker room. She would drive past him on his way to work, always in different cars borrowed from Morrison's fleet, but timing it so he would see her just long enough for his brain to register something familiar. Rebecca had mapped out 3 different routes that intersected with Tom's daily drive, rotating between them so she never appeared in the same place twice in a row. Sometimes she would be at the red light next to him, other times passing in the opposite direction, always driving cars Tom wouldn't recognize, but with her distinctive profile visible through the window. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Tom started feeling paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder during the most routine activities. He began checking his rearview mirror obsessively, convinced someone was following him, but never seeing the same car twice. He kept thinking he saw someone who reminded him of his ex-wife. But when he looked closer, it was just a blonde woman in expensive clothes who looked nothing like the conservative Rachel he remembered. His new girlfriend Jessica noticed the change immediately. Tom started acting jumpy and distracted, constantly checking his mirrors while driving and seeming nervous in public places. He would stop mid-conversation to stare at strangers, convinced he recognized them from somewhere. Jessica asked him multiple times if he was okay, but Tom couldn't explain the feeling that someone was watching him without sounding paranoid or crazy. The stress manifested in his work. Tom started snapping at his crew over minor mistakes, something he had never done before. His foreman, Miguel, who had worked with him for 8 years, pulled him aside and asked if everything was okay at home. Tom's hands would shake slightly when he reviewed blueprints, and he began double-checking decisions he would have made instinctively before. His confidence was cracking, and everyone around him could see it. Meanwhile, Rebecca was playing a much deeper game that extended far beyond psychological manipulation. She knew Tom's business operated on reputation and relationships built over 15 years of careful networking and quality work. So she started poisoning those relationships with surgical precision, using her intimate knowledge of every project he had ever completed. Rebecca spent weeks creating detailed fake online reviews for his work, but these weren't obvious fake reviews that could be easily dismissed. These reviews highlighted real problems that only someone with extensive construction knowledge would know about. She wrote about crooked tiles in the Johnson family bathroom, tiles she remembered watching Tom install in a rush because he had double-booked his crew that day. She mentioned poor drainage in the Martinez backyard, a shortcut she had warned him about during construction, telling him the slight grade change would cause water pooling during heavy rains. She pointed out uneven flooring in the community center, a problem Tom had covered up by strategically placing furniture and decorative elements rather than fixing the foundational issue. She detailed paint problems in the Henderson house renovation, where Tom had skipped the primer coat to save time, causing the expensive paint to peel within 6 months. Every complaint was real, every problem had actually occurred, but they had been overlooked by customers who trusted Tom's reputation and didn't know enough about construction to notice the shortcuts. These weren't random attacks. Rebecca had methodically documented Tom's corner cutting during their marriage, keeping detailed notes because she handled the customer service calls when problems arose. She knew exactly which projects had hidden flaws and which customers might be convinced to look more closely at work they had previously accepted. The impact on Tom's online reputation was devastating. His Google reviews dropped from an average of 4.8 stars to 3.2 stars within 2 months. His Better Business Bureau rating fell from A+ to B-. Potential clients who found him online started calling his competitors instead, and existing clients began asking uncomfortable questions about the quality of his work. But Rebecca's digital warfare went deeper than fake reviews. She knew Tom's website passwords because she had helped him set up the business's online presence years ago. Tom had never changed the passwords, still using the same combination of their wedding date and his mother's maiden name. Rebecca accessed his website analytics and saw which keywords brought him the most business, then arranged for Morrison Construction to bid aggressively on those same Google advertising terms. When potential customers searched for residential contractor or home renovation in their area, Morrison's ads appeared first, pushing Tom's business further down the search results. Rebecca increased Morrison's advertising budget specifically to target Tom's most profitable keywords, effectively stealing his online visibility. Rebecca also knew Tom's networking habits better than anyone after 15 years of attending business events with him. Every Thursday, he played poker with the same group of local business owners who had sent him referrals for years: Mike from the hardware store, Carlos from the real estate agency, and Dave, who owned 3 restaurants in town. These men had become Tom's primary source of high-end residential projects, recommending him to their wealthy customers and business associates. So Rebecca arranged for Morrison Construction to sponsor the annual charity golf tournament these men attended, investing $15,000 of company money to put Morrison's name everywhere. She positioned herself as Morrison's charming new marketing director, attending the tournament with business cards, genuine enthusiasm for helping the community, and an impressive knowledge of local business that came from years of listening to Tom's networking conversations. Rebecca had studied each man's personality and interests during years of company parties and business dinners. She knew Mike's passion for supporting local schools came from his own struggles with dyslexia as a child. She knew Carlos's pride in his family real estate business stemmed from his immigrant parents' sacrifices to give him opportunities. She knew Dave's love of classic cars connected to memories of working on a 1967 Mustang with his deceased father. By the end of the tournament, Rebecca had secured lunch meetings with all 3 men, positioning Morrison as a company that shared their values and understood their commitment to community. She offered Mike's hardware store a partnership deal for supplying Morrison's projects. She proposed helping Carlos's real estate clients with inspection reports and renovation estimates. She suggested catering Dave's restaurants for Morrison's company events and client meetings. The poker group started asking Tom uncomfortable questions about this impressive new competitor at their next game. Mike mentioned that Morrison's marketing director seemed to really understand the local market. Carlos praised their professional approach and attention to detail in client communications. Dave was impressed by their community involvement and suggested Tom should step up his own charitable contributions to stay competitive. Some of the poker players even mentioned getting quotes from Morrison for their personal projects, praising the professionalism of their marketing director and the competitive pricing of their estimates. Tom tried to laugh it off and change the subject, making jokes about new competition keeping everyone sharp. But Rebecca could see the worry in his eyes when she watched him through the restaurant window during their weekly game. Tom's paranoia about being watched wasn't entirely wrong. Rebecca had positioned herself as a regular customer at the sports bar where the poker game happened, sitting at the bar with a clear view of their usual table. She learned to read lips well enough to follow their conversations, taking notes on her phone about which players were wavering in their loyalty to Tom and which business opportunities she could exploit. Her cruelest move was targeting his relationship with Jessica, using the same intimate knowledge that made her business sabotage so effective. Rebecca knew Tom's patterns with women better than anyone after 15 years of marriage. He was predictable to a fault because he had learned one approach that worked and never deviated from it. He always took girlfriends to Romano's Italian restaurant for special occasions, always requested the corner table by the window because he thought it was romantic, always ordered the lobster ravioli and a bottle of Chianti Classico to impress them with his sophisticated taste. He would arrive exactly 15 minutes late because he believed it made him seem busy and important, and he always brought flowers, white roses from the same florist he had used during their courtship. So Rebecca booked the table directly next to theirs on Jessica's birthday, close enough to hear every word of their conversation while remaining completely unnoticed. She wore a black dress and kept her back to their table, appearing to be a professional woman dining alone while working on her laptop. The hostess recognized her as Rebecca Stevens from Morrison Construction, a customer who had become a regular for business dinners. Rebecca listened as Tom made the same promises to Jessica that he had once made to her. Promises about marriage, about building a future together, about how different she was from his crazy ex-wife who had tried to control his business decisions. He used the same phrases, the same timing, even the same gesture of reaching across the table to touch her hand when he talked about their future. But Rebecca also heard something else that made her smile with cold satisfaction. Tom was struggling financially in ways Jessica didn't understand. The lost contracts, delayed projects, and supplier problems were adding up faster than he had expected. He was borrowing money to cover payroll and had missed 2 payments on his truck lease. His business credit cards were approaching their limits, and he was considering taking out a second mortgage on the house he had won in their divorce. Jessica didn't know any of this because Tom was too proud to admit his business was failing. But Rebecca heard every worried word Tom spoke during a phone call he took at dinner, stepping away from the table to speak with his accountant about emergency financing options. She heard him lie to Jessica about why he seemed distracted, blaming it on being busy with new projects when the truth was he was desperate for any work at all. That phone conversation revealed something even more valuable than Tom's financial desperation. Rebecca learned that Tom had been lying to clients about his insurance coverage to win bids, telling them he carried full liability protection when he had actually downgraded his policy 6 months ago to save money. His accountant was warning him that this misrepresentation could destroy him if any client discovered the truth. That's when Rebecca realized she had him exactly where she wanted him. Desperate, paranoid, financially unstable, and completely unaware that his perfect ex-wife was orchestrating his downfall from the shadows. But she wasn't done yet. The psychological warfare and business sabotage had been just the setup for her real masterpiece. Rebecca's masterpiece wasn't a single devastating attack. Instead, she orchestrated a series of perfectly timed dominoes that would fall in sequence, each one making the next inevitable. The beauty was that Tom would destroy himself. She would just provide the gentle pushes at exactly the right moments. First, Rebecca planted evidence of Tom's financial desperation where his biggest client would find it. She knew Tom was bidding on the new City Hall renovation project, worth $3 million. the contract that could save his business or end it forever. As Rebecca Stevens, she had cultivated a friendship with Maria Santos, the city procurement officer who reviewed all contractor applications. During a casual coffee meeting, Rebecca mentioned overhearing troubling rumors about Tom's company at a construction industry event. She didn't make any direct accusations. That would have been suspicious. Instead, she expressed concern as a fellow business professional, suggesting that Maria might want to verify Tom's financial stability before awarding such a large public contract. Maria took the hint and ordered a deeper financial background check. The investigation revealed Tom's missed payments, maxed out credit lines, and the second mortgage he had secretly taken on his house. But more damning was what the investigators found when they dug deeper. Tom had been moving money between accounts to hide his cash flow problems, a practice that bordered on fraudulent accounting. The city rejected Tom's bid, not just for the renovation project, but for all future municipal contracts. In a small town, losing city approval was a death sentence for a construction business. Other contractors would whisper about why Tom Martinez suddenly couldn't get government work anymore. While Tom was reeling from that blow, Rebecca activated the second part of her plan. She knew Tom's crew, good men who had families to feed and bills to pay. Miguel, his foreman, had been loyal for 8 years, but loyalty couldn't pay for his daughter's medical treatments. Danny, his electrician, was saving money to buy a house with his pregnant wife. These men were watching Tom's business crumble and wondering about their futures. Rebecca approached them not as Rebecca Stevens, but through Morrison Construction's legitimate hiring process. Morrison needed experienced crew members for their expanding operations, and these men had excellent reputations in the industry. The job offers were generous, 20% more than Tom was paying, full health benefits, and job security with a growing company. Tom's crew didn't want to abandon him, but they couldn't feed their families on loyalty. One by one, they gave their notice. Miguel was the last to leave, tears in his eyes as he explained to Tom that he couldn't risk his daughter's health care by staying with a sinking business. Without his experienced crew, Tom couldn't complete his remaining projects. The few clients who hadn't canceled their contracts were now demanding refunds or threatening lawsuits for delays. Tom was forced to hire expensive temporary workers who didn't know his methods, leading to costly mistakes and further delays. The final domino was the cruelest. Rebecca knew Tom's pride would never let him admit defeat publicly. He would keep fighting, keep borrowing, keep making promises he couldn't keep until he destroyed not just his business, but his personal life as well. So Rebecca gave him exactly enough rope to hang himself. Through Morrison's network, she arranged for Tom to hear about a major commercial project in the next county, a shopping complex that would be worth $5 million to the winning contractor. The project was real, but Rebecca knew the developer had a reputation for demanding unrealistic timelines and making contractors eat cost overruns. Tom saw this project as his salvation. He borrowed against his life insurance policy to fund the bid preparation, mortgaged his truck to hire temporary workers, and even convinced Jessica to co-sign a loan using her credit. He put everything he had left into winning this contract. Rebecca made sure he won it. Using her influence at Morrison, she convinced them not to bid on the project, eliminating Tom's main competition. Other contractors, hearing whispers about Tom's financial problems, also stayed away. Tom got the contract almost by default, believing his luck was finally changing. But Rebecca knew what Tom didn't. The developer was already in financial trouble himself. The shopping complex was his desperate attempt to avoid bankruptcy, funded by investors who were asking difficult questions about previous failed projects. The timeline was impossible, the budget was inadequate, and the permits were tied up in environmental reviews that could take months to resolve. Tom threw everything he had left into the project, hiring workers he couldn't afford and buying materials on credit he didn't have. For 3 weeks he worked 18-hour days, believing he was building his comeback story. Then the developer's financing collapsed. The project was canceled overnight, leaving Tom with a mountain of expenses and no way to pay them. The borrowed money was gone, the materials couldn't be returned, and the workers demanded their wages. Jessica discovered how much debt he had put in her name and left him that same day. Within a month, Tom Martinez lost his business, his house, his truck, and his relationship. He declared bankruptcy and moved into a studio apartment across town, working as a day laborer for other contractors, men who had once considered him their equal. Tom's downfall took exactly 8 months from start to finish. 8 months of watching everything he had built crumble while he blamed bad luck, the economy, and unfair competition. He never suspected that his quiet, conservative ex-wife was the architect of his destruction. The revelation came on a Tuesday morning in the unemployment office. Tom was there to file his weekly claim, sitting in a plastic chair between a laid-off factory worker and a woman who had lost her retail job. The mighty Tom Martinez, reduced to government assistance and living off food stamps in the same town where he had once been considered a successful businessman. His life had become a series of humiliating routines. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he reported to the unemployment office to prove he was looking for work. Every morning, he checked job boards for construction positions that paid a fraction of what he used to earn. His studio apartment was a far cry from the 4-bedroom house he had won in the divorce, and his meals came from the food bank down the street. That's when he saw her. Rebecca Stevens was walking past the unemployment office toward the coffee shop next door, talking animatedly on her phone about a successful project completion. Her voice carried across the street as she discussed budget numbers that made Tom's stomach turn. Morrison Construction was handling projects worth millions, while he couldn't afford groceries. She wore a sharp charcoal business suit that probably cost more than Tom's monthly rent, and carried herself with confidence Tom had never seen in his ex-wife. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in an expensive cut, and she wore designer heels that clicked authoritatively on the sidewalk. Everything about her screamed success and power, the exact opposite of the defeated woman who had walked away from their divorce with almost nothing. But something about her laugh made him look closer. It was a genuine laugh, not the polite chuckle he remembered from Rachel. But there was something underneath it that made his skin crawl with recognition. Tom abandoned his place in the unemployment line and followed her into the coffee shop, staying far enough back to avoid being noticed. He positioned himself behind a newspaper display where he could watch her order. She approached the counter with easy confidence, smiled at the barista like they were old friends, and ordered a large coffee with oat milk and 2 sugars. Rachel had always drunk her coffee black with no sugar. She had claimed to love the bitter taste, though Tom now wondered if that was just another way she had made herself small during their marriage. This woman's voice had a slight southern accent that Rachel had never had, drawing out certain vowels in a way that sounded sophisticated and worldly. Her hair was platinum blonde instead of Rachel's mousy brown, cut in layers that framed her face and made her look years younger. She was noticeably thinner, but not in an unhealthy way. She looked strong and confident, like someone who had found time for self-care and personal training. She was completely different from the woman he had divorced. Yet something deep in Tom's mind screamed that he knew her. But when she turned to leave with her coffee, Tom saw her left wrist as she pushed open the door. There was a small phoenix tattoo that caught the morning light, delicate but bold against her pale skin. Tom's world tilted. Rachel had always said she wanted a phoenix tattoo someday, a symbol of rising from ashes, but she had been too scared to actually get one. She worried about what people would think, what Tom would say, whether it would look unprofessional. The old Rachel would never have gotten a tattoo, but this confident woman clearly lived by different rules. Tom's blood ran cold as pieces started falling into place. He followed Rebecca out of the coffee shop, his heart pounding as she walked to a brand new BMW parked outside Morrison Construction's main office. The same Morrison Construction that had somehow won every contract he had lost over the past 8 months, always submitting bids that were perfectly calculated to beat his by just enough to win. Tom sat in his beaten Honda across the street, watching Rebecca enter the Morrison building like she owned it. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see her greeting colleagues, shaking hands with men in expensive suits, pointing at architectural plans spread across conference tables. She belonged there in a way that made Tom's chest tight with the emotion he couldn't name. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the tattoo, the laugh, the way Rebecca Stevens held her coffee cup with both hands, exactly like Rachel used to do on cold mornings when she would bring him coffee in bed during the early years of their marriage. He started remembering all the strange coincidences from the past year, details his paranoid mind had dismissed as stress-induced imagination. How Morrison Construction always seemed to know exactly how to beat his bids, sometimes by margins so small it seemed impossible without inside information. How his suppliers had switched companies so suddenly, as if someone had offered them deals too good to refuse at the exact moment his business was most vulnerable. How his crew had been offered better jobs at Morrison Construction at the precise moment when his financial problems became impossible to hide. How his online reviews had started highlighting problems that only someone with intimate knowledge of his work methods would notice. How every networking relationship he had built over 15 years had somehow shifted to favor Morrison Construction. The next day, Tom pawned his wedding ring and hired a private investigator with money he couldn't afford to spend. He gave the investigator every detail he could remember about Rebecca Stevens, along with photos of Rachel from their marriage that he still kept on his phone, despite everything that had happened between them. The investigator was good at his job, but the case was almost too easy. Within 3 days, he called Tom with preliminary findings that made Tom's hands shake as he held the phone. Rebecca Stevens' background was completely fabricated. The college she claimed to attend had no record of her. The marketing firm on her resume had gone out of business 5 years before she supposedly worked there, and the apartment she rented had been paid for with cash from an account opened under her maiden name. Within a week, the investigator came back with a complete file that destroyed what was left of Tom's world. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Rebecca Stevens was Rachel Martinez. Every document proved it. The name change had been processed legally in Nevada 2 weeks after their divorce was finalized. The college degree was purchased from a diploma mill. The work history was completely fabricated, created by a company that specialized in fake employment verification for people who needed to disappear from their past lives. Bank records showed the trail of Rachel's transformation. She had spent nearly all of her divorce settlement creating Rebecca Stevens' identity, investing in everything from professional headshots to fake references to acting coaching. The investigator had traced payments to a private detective agency that had helped her research Tom's business relationships and financial vulnerabilities. Phone records revealed that Rebecca had been systematically contacting Tom's suppliers, clients, and employees for months, building relationships and gathering intelligence while positioning Morrison Construction as the better alternative. She had orchestrated every lost contract, every supplier defection, every crew departure with the precision of a military campaign. The investigator had photos that made Tom's stomach turn. Photos of Rachel entering her luxury apartment building, her blonde hair pulled back to reveal the face he had been married to for 15 years, but somehow failed to recognize. Photos of her at the gym, deliberately using the treadmill behind his usual machine while he worked out, close enough to touch him, while remaining completely invisible. Photos of her at Romano's restaurant, sitting at the table directly behind where he had taken Jessica for dinner. listening to every private conversation they had shared. Photos of her watching his poker game through the sports bar window, taking notes on her phone about his friends' conversations and business relationships. But the photos that hurt most were the recent ones. Rachel was dating someone new, Marcus Chen, a successful architect who worked with Morrison Construction on their high-end projects. The investigator had captured them together at expensive restaurants Tom could no longer afford, holding hands at art galleries, kissing in the parking lot of Rachel's luxury apartment complex that cost more per month than Tom's entire unemployment check. Rachel wasn't just surviving after their divorce. She was thriving beyond anything she had achieved during their marriage. She had a successful career where her intelligence was valued, a beautiful home filled with art and books, and a relationship with a man who clearly respected and adored her. She looked happier in these surveillance photos than Tom had ever seen her during 15 years of marriage. Everything Tom had thought he had taken from her in the divorce, she had rebuilt better than before. While he was celebrating his victory over her with Jessica, Rachel had been quietly planning her transformation into someone more successful, more confident, and more powerful than he had ever imagined possible. Tom stared at the photos for hours, his hands shaking with rage, disbelief, and something else he didn't want to acknowledge, a grudging respect for what she had accomplished. His quiet, submissive ex-wife had orchestrated the complete destruction of his life, using nothing but the knowledge she had gained by being his perfect, supportive partner for 15 years. Tom confronted her the next Thursday at the coffee shop, where she maintained her weekly routine. He had spent 3 sleepless nights planning what he would say, how he would handle seeing the woman who had destroyed his life, while pretending to be someone else entirely. He had rehearsed this moment over and over in his studio apartment, practicing different approaches in front of his bathroom mirror. Sometimes he imagined screaming at her, sometimes begging her to explain why she had done this to him. But mostly he had fantasized about the moment her confident facade would crumble when she realized she had been caught. Tom arrived an hour early and waited in his car across the street, watching the coffee shop entrance like a detective on surveillance. His hands were shaking from too much caffeine and nervous energy. He had borrowed money for a haircut and bought the nicest shirt he could afford at a thrift store, wanting to look like he still had some dignity left when he confronted the woman who had taken everything from him. At exactly 9:30 a.m., she arrived. Rebecca Stevens stepped out of her BMW wearing a cream-colored blazer and dark jeans that probably cost more than Tom's monthly food budget. She looked confident, successful, and completely at peace with herself. Everything Tom had lost, and everything he had never allowed Rachel to become during their marriage. He waited until she was settled at her usual table by the window, working on her laptop with the same focused concentration he remembered from when she used to manage his business finances late into the night. She had always been better with numbers than he was, catching errors his accountant missed and finding ways to save money without cutting quality. Tom had taken credit for her financial management for years, telling clients that his business sense kept them profitable. Now she was using those same skills against him. Tom bought a coffee he couldn't afford and sat down across from her without invitation, his heart pounding as he prepared to shatter her carefully constructed facade. Up close, he could see details that confirmed his suspicions. The same small scar on her chin from a childhood accident, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating, the familiar gesture of tucking hair behind her left ear. "Hello, Rachel," he said quietly, watching her face for any sign of recognition or fear. For just a moment, her mask slipped completely. Fear flashed across her face. Not the fear of being caught in an elaborate deception, but the instinctive, visceral fear of seeing the man who had spent their last year of marriage making her feel worthless and invisible. Tom saw her shoulders tense, her breathing quicken, and her hand move protectively toward her purse as if preparing to run. Then her expression shifted to cool composure. And when she spoke, it was still in Rebecca Stevens' carefully practiced Southern accent, though Tom could hear the slight tremor underneath it. "I'm sorry, do I know you? I think you have me confused with someone else," she said. But her fingers had tightened around her coffee cup, in the exact way Rachel used to do when she was nervous, a tell Tom had learned to recognize after 15 years of marriage. Tom placed the investigators' photos on the table between them, spreading them out like evidence in a trial. Photos of Rachel entering her apartment building, her blonde hair pulled back to reveal the face he had woken up next to for 15 years. Photos of her real driver's license with Rachel Martinez printed clearly under her picture. Photos of the legal name change documents showing the transformation from Rachel Martinez to Rebecca Stevens. Photos of her watching his poker games through the sports bar window, sitting alone at the bar with a clear view of his table. Photos of her at Romano's restaurant, positioned at tables where she could overhear his conversations with Jessica. Photos of her at the gym, deliberately using equipment that gave her sight lines to his workout routine. "I know exactly who you are," Tom whispered, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage that had been building for weeks. "The question is, how long have you been planning this? How long have you been watching me like some kind of stalker?" Rachel stared at the photos for a long moment, and Tom watched 15 years of marriage flash across her face as she calculated her options. He could see her weighing whether to continue the charade, run away, or finally drop the mask she had worn for 8 months. Her laptop screen showed a Morrison construction project timeline with budget numbers that made Tom dizzy. She was making more money in a single quarter than his business had earned in its best year. The success she had built while destroying him was undeniable and obvious. Finally, she closed her laptop, looked up at him, and when she spoke again, it was in Rachel's real voice, softer than Rebecca Stevens, but stronger and more certain than he had ever heard during their marriage. "I started planning it the day you told your lawyer I contributed nothing to the business I helped you build from absolutely nothing." The Southern accent was gone completely. The confident facade remained, but now it was backed by something more dangerous. The quiet fury of a woman who had been underestimated, dismissed, and discarded by someone who should have valued her most. "You want to know how long I've been planning this, Tom? I've been taking notes on your shortcuts and lies for 5 years. Every corner you cut that I begged you not to cut. Every rule you bent that I warned you would come back to hurt us. Every client you overcharged while I handled the complaints. I documented everything because I thought I was protecting our business. I never imagined I'd use it to destroy you." Tom felt the coffee shop spinning around him as Rachel continued, her voice getting stronger with each word. 15 years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. "You thought I was stupid because I never fought back when you belittled my ideas in front of clients. You thought I was weak because I let you make all the decisions even when I knew you were wrong. You thought I was worthless because I didn't have a college degree like your precious Jessica. But I was watching everything, Tom. I was learning from every mistake you made. And when you threw me away for a younger woman, you gave me the motivation to use everything I knew against you." Other customers in the coffee shop were starting to stare as Tom's voice rose, his composure completely shattered. "You destroyed my life. You made me lose everything I worked for. My business, my house, my crew, everything." Rachel's laugh was cold and sharp, nothing like the nervous giggles Tom remembered from their marriage. "I didn't destroy your life, Tom. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own choices. Every supplier who left you was already tired of your late payments and broken promises. I just gave them better options with a company that treats them with respect." She paused to take a sip of her coffee, completely calm, while Tom's world fell apart across from her. "Every client who fired you was already unhappy with corners you cut and deadlines you missed. I just helped them realize they deserved contractors who cared about quality over quick profits. Every crew member who quit was already looking for better opportunities, I just made sure Morrison offered them the respect and benefits you never would." She leaned forward, and Tom saw something in her eyes he had never noticed during their marriage: intelligence, calculation, and absolute certainty in her own power. The transformation wasn't just physical. This was a woman who had discovered her own worth after years of being told she was replaceable. The insurance fraud, the financial manipulation, the corner cutting that endangered people's safety, that was all you, Tom. I just made sure the right people found out about it at the right time. You destroyed yourself with 15 years of bad decisions. I was just the match that lit the fire you built with your own hands." Tom's face turned red with rage and humiliation. "You think you're so smart now? You think you've won? I'll tell everyone who you really are. I'll expose you to Morrison Construction, to your new boyfriend, to everyone in this town." Rachel smiled, a genuine smile that held no fear whatsoever. "Go ahead, Tom. Tell them exactly who I am." She pulled out her phone and showed him her screen. It was Morrison Construction's company directory, and there at the top was her photo with the title Senior Business Development Manager, Rebecca Stevens, formerly Rachel Martinez. Tom's mouth fell open. "What? How?" "I told them everything 3 months ago," Rachel said calmly. "About the divorce, about why I changed my name, about my previous experience in the construction industry. They were impressed that I had 15 years of hands-on business knowledge and the motivation to help them compete with unethical contractors." She scrolled through her phone, showing Tom internal Morrison Company emails praising her performance and discussing her upcoming promotion to vice president. "My boss thinks it's brilliant that I understand the local construction market so well. The CEO loves that I can identify companies with poor business practices and help Morrison win contracts by simply being more professional and reliable than the competition." Tom felt sick. But Marcus, your boyfriend, he doesn't know who you really are." Rachel's laugh was genuinely amused now. "Marcus Chen? The architect I'm dating? Tom, he was married to an abusive woman for 12 years before his divorce. He knows exactly what it's like to rebuild your life after escaping a toxic relationship. He helped me practice my Southern accent for the Rebecca Stevens character." Tom's world crumbled further with each revelation. "This is insane. You can't destroy someone's life and get away with it." "I didn't destroy anything, Tom. I built something beautiful." Rachel's voice was stronger than he had ever heard it. "I built a career where people value my ideas. I built relationships based on honesty and respect. I built a life where I don't have to apologize for being intelligent or ambitious." She gestured around the coffee shop, at her expensive clothes, at the success that radiated from every aspect of her appearance. "You taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. You showed me that nice women finish last, that loyalty means nothing, and that the only person who will protect my interests is me. So I stopped being nice. I stopped being loyal to people who didn't deserve it, and I started protecting my interests with the same ruthlessness you used against me." Tom was desperate now, grasping for any way to hurt her back. "The police. I'll tell the police you committed fraud, that you used a fake identity." "To do what exactly?" Rachel asked calmly. "Everything I did was legal, Tom. Changing my name is legal. Getting a job under my new legal name is legal. Competing with your business is legal. Even giving anonymous tips about actual safety violations is legal." She leaned back in her chair, completely relaxed, while Tom fell apart in front of her. "The only illegal activity anyone can prove is yours. The insurance fraud you committed when you lied about coverage, the tax evasion your accountant documented, the building code violations the city inspector photographed. I didn't forge those documents, Tom. You did." Tom realized with growing horror that Rachel had planned for this moment too. She had covered every angle, protected herself from every possible retaliation, while leaving him completely exposed. "Why? was all he could manage to whisper. "Why destroy me like this?" Rachel was quiet for a long moment, studying his face like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Because you made one critical mistake, Tom. You assumed that 15 years of marriage meant I didn't know how to survive without you. You assumed that because I let you make the decisions, I didn't understand how those decisions were made. You assumed that because I loved you, I was weak." She stood up, gathering her things with calm efficiency. "But I was never weak, Tom. I was just loyal to the wrong person. Now I'm loyal to myself, and it turns out I'm very good at taking care of my own interests." As she prepared to leave, Tom grabbed her wrist desperately. "Rachel, please! I'm sorry about how things ended between us. I'm sorry about the divorce, about Jessica, about everything, but this has gone too far. Can't we find a way to move forward?" Rachel looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back at his face. For a moment, Tom thought he saw a flash of the woman he had been married to, someone who might have been moved by his apology, someone who might have shown mercy. Instead, she gently removed his hand and smiled. "Tom, you're apologizing because you got caught and lost everything. Not because you hurt me, not because you were wrong. You're sorry because there are consequences now, and you can't charm or lie your way out of them." She picked up her purse and prepared to walk back to her successful life. "The woman you divorced would have forgiven you and tried to help you rebuild. But Rebecca Stevens doesn't know that woman anymore, and frankly, neither do I." 6 months later, Rachel Martinez, who now legally and permanently went by Rebecca Stevens, was promoted to vice president of Morrison Construction. The company had grown by 40% since her arrival, winning contracts that had historically gone to smaller local competitors. Her success wasn't just measured in destroyed rivals, but in the legitimate empire she had built from the ashes of her old life. Tom, meanwhile, was working as a day laborer for other contractors, including some projects managed by Morrison Construction. The irony wasn't lost on either of them when Tom's crew was assigned to clean up debris from a Morrison job site. He spent his days hauling concrete and lumber under the supervision of men who used to consider him their equal in the local construction community. The town had completely forgotten about Tom Martinez Construction. His former clients spoke about their projects in the past tense, if they mentioned him at all. Most people assumed he had simply retired or moved away after his divorce. The few who knew the truth about his business collapse blamed it on poor management and an inability to compete with more professional companies. But Rachel's revenge had evolved beyond just destroying Tom. She had become genuinely successful at Morrison Construction, developing innovative marketing strategies and building client relationships that benefited everyone involved. Her colleagues respected her intelligence and drive. Her boyfriend Marcus supported her ambitions and celebrated her achievements. She had built a life that was better than anything she had experienced during her marriage. The final twist came when Tom's financial desperation led him to apply for a job at Morrison Construction. He needed work desperately, and Morrison was hiring experienced construction workers for their expanding operations. Tom submitted his application under his full name, hoping his years of experience would outweigh his recent business failures. The application landed on Rebecca's desk for approval. She stared at Tom's resume for a long time, remembering the man who had once promised to take care of her forever, who had built a business with her help, and then claimed she had contributed nothing. She thought about the 15 years she had spent supporting his dreams while abandoning her own. She thought about the humiliation of the divorce proceedings and the satisfaction of watching him lose everything he had valued more than their marriage. Then she stamped his application with a bright red "Rejected" seal and filed it away. Tom never learned that his ex-wife had personally denied his application. He assumed Morrison Construction simply wasn't interested in hiring someone with his recent track record. He continued working day labor jobs, living in his studio apartment, and wondering how his life had fallen apart so completely. Meanwhile, Rebecca Stevens continued building her empire, one successful project at a time, secure in the knowledge that the best revenge wasn't just destroying her enemy. It was becoming everything he had never allowed her to be. 2 years have passed since that confrontation in the coffee shop. Rebecca Stevens now owns 20% of Morrison Construction and is engaged to Marcus Chen. Their wedding announcement appeared in the local newspaper's business section, featuring a photo of the happy couple at a charity gala where Morrison Construction donated $50,000 to the Children's Hospital. Tom saw the announcement while picking up day-old newspapers from the recycling bin outside his apartment building. He studies free newspapers now, looking for job listings and discount coupons to stretch his food stamp benefits. The woman in the wedding photo looked radiant, successful, and completely at peace with her choices. But this story isn't over, because last week Rebecca received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of her and Marcus having dinner at an upscale restaurant, taken from outside the window with a telephoto lens. Written on the back in Tom's handwriting were 4 words that made her blood run cold. "I know your secrets." Tom had spent 2 years watching Rebecca build her new life, taking the same careful notes she had once taken on his business practices. He had learned patience from her example, and he had discovered something about Rebecca Stevens that could destroy everything she had built. Something that Marcus doesn't know. Something that Morrison Construction would never forgive. Something that could send her to prison. The hunted had become the hunter. And Rebecca was about to learn that revenge is a game 2 people can play.